Hey, what's up, guys? It's been a couple weeks probably since I last updated anything. I've been kind of just working. Like I stated before, I've been really busy between work and like personal life. So a lot of this has come from I will grab a couple hours here, maybe come out for an hour. And so I just haven't recorded anything just because I'm trying to get work done. And when you only have an hour, sometimes a couple hours, a lot of this stuff can take a lot of time, and that's just time I figured was better spent just working. Plus, a lot of this, you've already seen a lot. It's just me welding and fitting and cutting pipes. Nothing new. But I'm going to catch you up on where I'm at. Now, currently, I have the driver's side door bars fully welded in. As you can see, I primed kind of everything. It's just a light coat of primer. I've got the steering wheel dash mount in. Another day working on EMILIA. I think what I'm going to do right now is work on the steering wheel mount. So after kind of working through a few different options, I think what I'm going to do is take this piece of angle iron right here. It was already measured out. Cut it into a couple 1-inch strips. Well, 4, one for each hole. And then that'll kind of form the L. And then I can just weld a plate to the upright portion of this. Alright, let's see what I've done. So I basically made these little L brackets, drilled a hole in them for an 8mm bolt, which is the size to go through here. And then I have 2 of these plates. They're all cleaned up. Basically what I'm going to do is to maximize weld surface between the two, I'm going to weld this in at an angle relative to the steering shaft. It shouldn't matter because we're going to cut a U in here anyway, and so we can basically angle it whatever way we want. I'm going to go ahead and tack weld these in place. So at least this is held, and then I'll do the other side, and then I'll bring them over and final weld them. Here. So what I did is I've got nuts welded on the bottom side. So we should just be able to weld the bolt the steering wheel up to this. And then this is a dash mount for the instrument cluster, or instrument cluster mount. So same thing, I've got nuts welded on the back side. So the steering wheel and stuff should just be able to bolt up. The dashboard bolt up to this. The dashboard is held on just by 2 bolts right now on the bottom, and so it kind of sits there, and I'm sure it'll vibrate a lot, so I don't know, we might have to strap it down or zip tie it or something. I don't know, we'll find some way to secure it more, because driving with it like that isn't going to be good. Moving over to the passenger side, I've got the passenger side door bars, I would say 3/4 the way welded. I have, on the bottom one, I've got them welded all the way around from the inside. And then the top bar, I have them probably anywhere from half to 1/4 the way welded from the inside. I mostly need to weld them from the outside. But to do that, I was going to flip the car around just due to ease of entries. I've got a couple spots I kind of need to finish up on the inside, but not a huge deal. Most of the other cage is all the same. Eventually, I would like to put the, I think they called it a sag bar, anti-sag bar across, basically just to continue this bar across to the other side. That's one of those things that's not a necessary item, but they like to see it, so I'd like to put it in. Just like these door bars are necessary, the support bars, like these guys, are not necessary, but again, one of those things that are recommended. So between these and the dash bar and these little triangulation pieces here, I think as far as the rules go, will be pretty solid, because all the welds, you know, while they're not great, they're pretty decent looking. They're all the way around. All our plates, our spreader plates, are much more than the requirement. So the requirement is 24 square inches of plate. I think our smallest one are these rear ones, and they're 32 inches square. They're 8 by 4. These ones are 36 inches square, and then I don't know what those ones are. They're somewhere in that 36 range, I think. So I think as far as tech inspection and stuff, we should be good to go. I'm not too worried about it. What my plan is right now is to finish the door bars, basically get everything ready as far as the minimum requirements for the rules, and then if I have time, I might go in and add some extras. For instance, the anti-sag bar across that side, there could be some other triangulation points you could put in here. I still kind of want to take bars from the top of the hoop and X-brace to the rear struts. That'd probably be a lot of work, so I'm not really sure if I want to do it. And then, you know, you might be able to like run some bracing up the front. One of the new things that race cars are doing, and I'm not gonna do, is, I forget what they call it, but it's basically a bar that goes from down here up into here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, basically from down on this bar up into this bar, and it's like anti-crush bar. Because if you can imagine, if this thing flips and lands on its roof, on the front of this, you've got the weight coming down, and basically, you know, you got your weak point here. So it'll bend in this way easier, and so this bar just supporting this way would provide more of a straight line angle for that force to go down into that spreader plate. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent and rambling again. Sorry, I have a tendency to do that. Let's talk about what we need to do to get the car running. We got to measure for a belt. We got to get the cooling system back in. And, I mean, truthfully, if you're not running the car very long, you don't need coolant in this car to run, but we might as well get some water in this thing, kind of, so when it is time to run, we can make sure that everything seems fine. We got to hook up the transmission cooler, which again shouldn't take very long, and then we also got to put the intake on. Now the intake, I managed to snag a brand new one. Again, this thing's probably going to be pretty cheap, off Amazon for $42. It's right here. It's all boxed up. But hey, 42 bucks, not too bad. I don't even know if we could get a used one for that cheap. As I mentioned before, it's basically going to put the air filter right here, which kind of turns it into a hot air intake. Not ideal. This is where the battery mounts. Ideally, put the battery right here, run the intake right here. maybe make a little box. Use this side to bring fresh air in, along with, there's a nice big hole right here. So you could potentially punch a hole through this part of the front bumper. Use it to get air up in here. Might actually just be able to do that with keeping the air filter there. I don't know, we'll see. But let's start working on this. Alright, I was going to install it in the vehicle, but I think it's just going to be easier to actually show you what's going on out here. Alright, I don't know if you can see it any better. No, it's not so greasy. Got a space, space, and space. So let's see, this thing, it's going to be facing this way. So basically, this little V is going to go into a space, and then each of these little legs are going to click into one. Alright. So now that's in. Now these things will go shooting off if you're not careful. Alright, that one's in. And then basically to pull it, you just got to get under one of those, kind of pop it out. Let's do a nice little unboxing video for you here. I opened the package, that's as far as I've gone. Alright, this is going to be the MAF sensor tube. Say those welds actually look pretty nice. Surprisingly, not a terrible looking piece. A little rough on here. We might have to file down the inside, just kind of smooth that out, but not terrible. Let's look at this other tube first. So this obviously is just an elbow. And these two, so one of these is going to be this tube, and then I believe the other one is going to be this guy. Probably something like that, maybe. Yeah, it's got to go that way. I went with red, obviously. It was also the cheapest. These are just rubber. Again, we're not dealing with boosts, so it doesn't really matter. Should hold just fine. This must be for the throttle body. You can see there's a little bit of a taper to this one. Yep. Then these two lines, again, mount to the intake itself. Finally have some clamps, a couple bolts, and a couple aluminum mounting brackets here. And finally, the air filter. All in all, that's kind of cheap feeling plastic. Kind of hard, but I'd say for $42, I don't see anything obviously wrong with it. It's obviously not the highest quality in the world, but should work. Okay. So there's three the same size, one smaller one. That's got to be for the throttle body. So let's... something like that. Looks like an 8mm socket works for these. That's gonna do it for tonight. Probably gonna go back inside, enjoy my night, maybe try and figure out a solution for that or look into it a little bit. We're not too far off. I have to get at that corner to probably take the wheel off so I can run a string around the crank pulley and try and figure out what size belt I need. Because I believe you can just go in and order a belt by length and number of ribs. So if I figure that out, the only trick I'm gonna have to do is basically take everything out of the tensioner. And so when you put the belt on, the tensioner is nearly fully, I guess, retracted. So it has all the room to apply tension to the belt. Oh, also, if you notice the Band-Aid on my chin, I did get myself pretty good with one of those bars, actually. I split the bottom of my chin open. And it's glued shut, but my wife hates the sight of blood, so she had me put a Band-Aid on it. So that's that. All right, mid next day, I've been working a little bit. One of the things I did is I went and got a belt. Now, if you notice, this belt I got is 1 rib short. I don't know, they seem to have trouble finding a 7-rib belt, but this is a 6-rib. It's pretty close to the right length. I think perhaps maybe we should try a 1/2 inch shorter. This is a 55-inch belt. So what we really need is a 55-inch 7-rib. However, this one will probably work. I'm at least gonna try and fire the car up on this belt because I don't feel like going back to the store. I haven't filled up any coolant yet. What I have done is I got the seat in and I used the Teflon lock nuts on the seat braces down here. And then I fully tighten them, and then I actually fully tighten the seat into this position. I've got the steering wheel in with the cluster, and then I have the submarine and the lap belts snapped into their eyelets. I also screwed in all the threaded eyelets, and I put removable Loctite on them. They should be in. And then I got the shoulder harnesses. I gotta look to see exactly how you do it. I've never threaded shoulder harnesses around a bar, so I'm not entirely sure how it's done. They're very specific in the rules about how you route the belt. I just got to spend a little time and look at that. I thought, though, you guys might like to see basically where I'm at right now. What I have to do now is put this wiring harness back in, and for the time being, I'm probably going to get some zip ties and just kind of zip tie it roughly over and run it down to all the essential stuff, and I'll kind of take you through that as I'm going through it. Getting somewhere, basically just matching colors and shapes. You know, get out your inner 3-year-old. one of the things I am gonna have to do is make sure all this stuff has grounds. All right, I'm about to start working on the car, just trying to figure out some small things. I gotta ground a bunch of the chassis or the interior wiring harness. So I was just gonna make little plates to weld to the cage. And one of my projects is getting this mounted somewhere. Now, originally it mounts kind of by the driver's left foot up against the sill. However, this being a race car, one, I don't want the driver or somebody accidentally hitting that lever as they get in and out. And two, the driver shouldn't really have to worry about it. It should almost be more of a pit crew thing. Because, I mean, your gas door is right here. So what I think I'm going to do is mount it to the roll cage so it's accessible just right here. The problem I'm having is that this is a bracket it's all mounted to. As you can see, it's looks like it's like zinc coated or galvanized or something. And it's, you know, it's moderate thickness, but nothing crazy. But this is the one bracket right here with that slot, which allows one mounting hole. And so that's going to allow it to move around with only one bolt holding it in. And I don't want that to be an issue. So I was brainstorming about how to make a little bracket, you know, maybe make a little like C channel that it kind of slides into, and then the one bolt is essentially just holding it into the C channel, and the C channel is the one supporting it. So I was kind of digging through my scrap bin just to see if there was anything I could cut apart, and then I found this. I don't really remember what this is for. However, if you look, it fits almost perfectly in there. And it's probably 1/8 inch, maybe a little bit thicker. It's a good chunk of steel, be plenty of strong. All I have to do is make some cuts, which I've already kind of marked for it. Clean it up a little. Mark where I'm going to mount the bolt. So I'm going to weld a nut on the back side. And then just weld it to a part of the cage right there, and it'll be all done. Now, I'm also looking at the cage and checking the rule book. They basically talk about there's minimum requirements and then everything they recommend. So right now this cage is a little bit beyond minimum requirements. So essentially the 6 point is a minimum. So you got your 6 points where the cage contacts the chassis. The spreader plates are well above minimum. This single harness bar going into this diagonal piece is the minimum. The door bars are the minimum. What I have extra in right now is these guys. Aren't even mentioned in the rule book, but they call this kind of a NASCAR cage, NASCAR style. These aren't in there, but they are tied into the frame rail here. And then these are essentially gusseting, but this is using the same material as the cage itself. So this triangulation right here is a pretty strong piece. But they were talking about gusseting basically, you know, in a bunch of the joints, so you'd have a little gusset here, you know, all these little corners and stuff. There's a couple ways to do gussets. There's like the interior gusset, I don't know what it's called, but basically like a
1/4 inch piece or whatever that fits in to your angle, like on the inside edge of the bar, and you basically just weld it in. It kind of provides extra support to this joint. There's also called a taco one, where you basically take a thinner piece of metal. So for instance, like you could do a taco right here, and it basically goes from here, wraps around the other side, and then you weld all along this edge.
They look pretty nice. My concern is they won't be able to see the welds on the inside of the taco gusset. I don't know how much of a concern that's going to be, since they can see the welds on every other part of the cage, and I think the welds are, I'm not going to say a strong suit of the cage, because I'm definitely not a professional welder, but if I had to guess, I'd say these are probably better looking welds than at least some of the cars I've seen. So I think looking at these welds, it should give them confidence that the cage is, it should give them confidence that the cage is welded well enough, and that any welds that are covered by gusseting are there. So I would think being able to look at the rest of the cage and the welds all around the whole rest of the cage, they could make a safe assumption that anything covered up by a taco gusset has been welded to the same, I guess, standards, if you want to call it, as the whole rest of the cage. I don't know that for sure, but I'm gonna try and figure it out. So I think it's not really gonna be a gusset, but I'm gonna put a thin little piece right here. Basically, we have this grounding, this major grounding point for the harness, and I need a place to bolt it to. And this is kind of a major part of the harness that terminates in this area, and so I think just doing a little plate with a nut on the back side, just weld it in here. Then you can have your grounding point just kind of welded. And I thought about doing something a little tricker along the back side so it's a little more hidden. But, you know, then I'm welding on the back side of the tube, and I'm just not sure it's necessary. I also looked at maybe trying to get it over here, but it's a bit of a stretch. Probably wouldn't be an issue. I don't know. Maybe I'll play with it a little lot, but I'll update you kind of as I go and get things done. Just wanted a little update and talk at you for a little bit. All right, we got it running. So far, I'm not seeing any leaks. This is still on herc, but this don't show the EPA. It kicked into a pretty high idle, like almost 2,000 RPMs. I'm not exactly sure why, but the temp gauge is already coming up, which is good. I'm gonna work on getting this thing out and then we'll see, but I want to let it run for a little bit. I got this coolant cleaner in there. So we got to let that, it just kind of run for a while before we can change out the coolant. So you let it run, you drop all this out, you put some fresh stuff in, kind of rinse the system.
You can see the belts working.
We'll kind of double check the fluids before we drive out of here, but I'll just take it for a quick little drive around the neighborhood. So during video editing, I noticed part of, a video that I shot, updating where I was on the vehicle. I accidentally shot in time-lapse mode, which doesn't record audio, because I'm an idiot. So I'm going to give you a quick update video about where I'm at with the vehicle as it sits. I'm gonna try and post a video tonight so you'll see where it actually is right now. We'll make this snappy.
Roll cage completely welded in. I got the passenger side door bars welded in.
As stated earlier in the video, where it at now, it's like passing plus a little bit. I feel comfortable that it would pass as is. I would like to go a little bit extra because who wants to ride the line, but basically everything on it is passable, and then there's a little bit extra. Over to the driver's side.
This is the plate that I made for grounding. I painted it earlier. These bolts are just in there to protect part of the actual contact area and the threads from paint, so we get a good electrical connection. This gas cap trunk release is mounted. It's on this part of the roll cage. You can see from here I mounted it back, so hopefully it kind of protects it from getting yanked by stuff. My thought being the pit crew can come up, basically press it, it opens the gas cap, they refuel it, shut it. If they need to get in the trunk or whatever, it's access right here, and the driver doesn't have to worry about doing any of it.
As you saw earlier, the vehicle, I did get it running. Obviously, if you haven't noticed, it's facing the other way in the garage. It's because after I got it running, I backed it out, drove it around the cul-de-sac. Everything seemed good with it. And then I pulled it back in facing this way. It seems to get up to temperature roughly where it looks like it should be and just kind of hold there without the radiator fans coming on, which is good news because that means it's cooling what it needs to without the radiator fans so far. I didn't let it idle super long and it's not super hot here, so we'll kind of see where that goes. But everything seems to be going decently so far. It still starts hard, but what are you gonna do? Can't have everything. Finally, I do have it completely off the ground. I was up checking the exhaust. And good news, I think the exhaust is gonna be pretty straightforward. It's nearly a straight shot from where I'm gonna do the exhaust to the rear. I already got the bolts off. Basically where the catalytic converter bolts up to the exhaust manifold. I got all those bolts off, no problem. I think I'm just gonna end up cutting the exhaust pipe ahead of the actual catalytic converter, but behind that exhaust flange, so I can just use the factory exhaust flange, make the exhaust from there to the rear. I have all the exhaust parts coming this week. I also have the toe straps coming this week.
So at some point, I'll take this rear bumper off. We'll get a toe strap, run through the bumper, and then I think I'm also gonna fabricate a rear lift point into this bumper or behind it.
And basically all that is gonna be is a piece of tube that's braced, coming off the bumper, so that getting the, like if you want to jack up the rear of the car, you just have a point that's nice and easy and low to get to, instead of going under one side and having to jack up one side and then go around the other and jack up the other side. That's the car as it sits tonight. Roll cage done, some other stuff done, still need to do exhaust, some other stuff. There's a never-ending list of things that need to get addressed. But I'm feeling pretty good because the car's running, it's driving, the roll cage is in passable function. Anyway, you guys have a good night. I'll see you next time.